And welcome to today's edition of Dr. Carol's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. Well, today we're talking about what's ailing America, from farmers to families. And perfect guest for that is Brian Reisinger, who is the son of a farmer and who has written a book um, called, let's go, oh God, called Land Rich, Cash Poor. And it was inspired by his own father and his own family. And not to give too much away, Brian, because I'll leave that to you. But it's interesting that you feel that you feel guilty that you um, disappointed, I guess, in a way, your father, who had psychological problems, who is a an example, a tragic example of what we're talking about here. Um, but what I in reading all of your stuff, what I realized, and I hope you realize it too, is that in the end, even though you may not be milking the cows, you are doing a lot to bring attention to the plight of farmers. So why don't we take it from you and from your childhood and from your family story, and then bring it like chronologically to what it is that you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that, Doctor, and I appreciate your insight on that. And I think you're right. It's something that I struggle with and have to remind myself of. But the reality is that, look, my dad did something and is still doing something as a third generation farmer, and me and my sister are the fourth generation of that farm family that is, in my mind, a really noble profession. And from my great grandparents escaping pre-World War I Europe on up through the Depression and the farm crisis and all the things that family farms have survived, I saw my dad carrying that forward. And although I grew up loving where I was from, and although I found a way to be
Which was
involved.
Wisconsin.
Yes, I grew up in the hills of southern Wisconsin in Midwestern farm country. And although I loved where I was from, my talent, or I hoped I had a talent with words that was better than the one I had with cattle and crops. And I've since come back around full circle. I tell our story in my book. I write about rural and farm issues for Today Network and elsewhere. And I help out on the business side of the farm in addition to my own work. And they throw me in a tractor when I'm home and able to help. So I lend a hand by telling our story and by helping out just as a family member, but I'm not the one to take over the farm. And so I was the first son in our family, my dad's family, to go to college. And I was also the first son in four generations, first eldest son in four generations not to take over the farm. And so I was very proud and grateful for the opportunities my dad created for me. I also felt ashamed at having not taken over the farm like he did and his father before him and so on. And so that's what I carried around for a long time. And I appreciate what you're saying about having the chance to make a contribution. And it was really important. Although my dad's alive and well and still farming, and my sister's working to take it over. You're right. He dealt with something that so many farmers deal with, the mental health challenges, the silent mental health crisis we have in rural America. And he struggled with that to the point of thinking of harming himself. I'm grateful he didn't, but it was a real challenge for our family, and it's one that so many families are facing.
It's interesting. I read. What was I reading? I was reading something here. Well, I guess a piece that you wrote for USA Today. Rural America faces a silent mental health crisis. My dad fought to survive it, and I came away from that thinking that he had killed himself.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, he's still here. I'm grateful to say
I'm
that he.
glad to hear
But
that.
we had farmers, and we wanted to be really raw and honest about that story because of the exact risk you're talking about. We had farmers that I grew up with, and then lived down the road, who have taken their lives. And there's actually and you would actually have a lot of insights into this, I think. But one of the reasons is because the physical stress of the job. It's very common in farming, logging, other types of resource industries where people are working in dangerous jobs. Suicide and mental health are very common. But in farming, there's some particular reasons for it. It's that, but it's also the fact that the farms, it's getting harder and harder for family farms to make it every year. And you've got that generation upon generation pressure. Like I mentioned, how I felt like I'd failed for not farming. When the farm struggles or when there's a challenge that a farmer is facing that is no fault of their own, has to do with big forces in our economy, they still feel like they're carrying forward something. And the question is, can they make it? And they feel like a failure, even when they're defying incredible odds. And so that's the kind of thing that farmers who have taken their lives were facing. And it's the kind of feelings my dad was facing. And I'm grateful he made it through by thinking about his grandchildren. My sister's had six kids, and I have one little girl now. And it's thinking about the next generation, what he needed to teach him that really got him to think about something hopeful. And then it was talking with the Farmer Angel Network and our family and others that helped him work through those feelings. But he's facing something that's a very common thing amongst farmers for that reason.
Yes, I read that about the next generation, but I was a little confused by it, since
Sure,
like what is he still alive or what? Well, it's
sure.
good to hear that he is.
Yeah,
It's interesting also I found that he became he went into this deep depression after he had to sell his cows,
yeah,
I guess to keep the farm afloat. And
that's
a
right.
lot of times people, even though, you use the cows, I guess you sell the cows for meat for right to become steaks.
Yeah, that's one of the
Well, I
uses, and
mean,
also to produce
and the
milk. It was both.
milk, yes,
Yep,
of course, the milk.
yep,
Um, and so it's, farmers get attached to their cows.
yeah.
They're not just for the milk and the meat. They're like pets.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. We have animals that we're raising to produce milk and to produce meat ultimately and all that. And you also build a relationship, a kinship. You are there, and this is some of the beauty. I don't want to only mention the hardship. There's some this your question here ties to some of the beauty too. You're there in the morning, early morning, golden barn light there against the cows in the winter. It's their warmth that keeps you warm as you're working alongside of them. You bring them in from pasture in the morning with one whistle from the cow dog. I mean, there's beautiful things, and a relationship is really built. And so even though an animal is only there for a certain period of time, couple of years, a relationship is built. And when that animal goes to the slaughterhouse, there's one of their calves coming up. And so you form this ongoing relationship. You have an understanding of the circle of life, but there's also a relationship with the herd, both those cows that are still here, the calves that they're having, the cows that were once here. It's an ongoing organism. And so when you sell the herd, it's the closest thing to a death in the family that you could have without it
Mhm,
being a
mhm.
human loved one. And that's what we experienced. You're absolutely right. We decided we needed to sell the cows for a variety of economic reasons, my dad's health, all kinds of other things, what would work for my sister's life as she was working toward taking over the farm, economic
What about
conditions.
your sister's husband? Is he?
So he's a mechanic. He works on performance level tractors, and so she's someone who is farming and wants to farm, and she has kids who help out, and she and my dad work on that together.
Mhm.
And it's not uncommon for farmers these days to have other off-farm jobs. My sister has an off-farm job also as a cosmetologist working in hair, and her husband is a mechanic. Yeah, and part
Interesting.
of the reason for those multiple off-farm jobs is because when I was growing up, a farm was a middle class living for a family. My dad farmed full time. He was able to help me get through college. I also helped pay for it with early morning newspaper jobs and waiting tables and all kinds of stuff. But he was able to help do that. Nowadays, a farm, a small family farm, often isn't able to be full-time income. And so people will have multiple off-farm jobs like I'm talking about.
So, what are some of the things that are making it so hard for farmers these days?
There is this overall phenomena that we've had in this country that you may have heard of. It's called get big or get out. And basically, there's economic forces that are forcing farms to get bigger and bigger if they want to be able to continue to produce things at the right price. They're basically the cost that it takes to produce goods is going up, 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 up. And the price that the farmer gets for their goods, whether it's meat they're selling or crops they're growing or what have you, is not going up at the same rate. Oftentimes, it's staying flat or falling. And so you can't have rising costs and falling or steady or stagnant profits and not wipe out operations. And one of the only ways to deal with that is to get bigger and bigger and bigger to have economic scale. And so that's something that's been really forced upon our farmers. The big farms got that way, trying to survive the same forces that were wiping out the other farms. It's driven by something that I discovered in the book. I wanted to answer the question in Land Rich Cash Poor of why are our farms disappearing? And so I investigated 100 years of family farm history to figure out why that was and wove that with our family's personal story through the generations. The issues that I discovered are that there are economic crises we don't understand the way they affect our farmers, whether it's Great Depression, the farm crisis, COVID, any of that. There are governmental policies that make it harder for family farms. And then technology is a double-edged sword. It moves agriculture forward with technological advancements, but also a lot of our technology is not focused on the kind of technology that can work for medium and small size farms as well as large. So we have innovation that only helps certain types of farms. So those economic crises, those government policies, and the technological double sword has wiped out more farms than we would need to, more than the natural market would normally wipe out.
What about also, isn't it true that China is buying a lot of farmland
Yeah,
and
China has been a
destroying?
big part of this. China is buying up farmland partially to get their hands on our food supply, to your exact point. They also have bought it uncoincidentally near military installations, and they want to be able to have that strategic ground. And that's something we should be really concerned about. And China, it's one of many ways that China has affected the American farmer. Another is that China buys up and has done this for decades, so many American agricultural products that really we become captive to them. We have to sell to them because they're one of the biggest buyers and they can move the price by themselves. So they'll buy up a whole bunch of it, and then they'll start dumping it to push the price down. They also cheat on all kinds of trade standards, in addition to other things you've probably heard about, like manipulating their currency and other things. So between buying up our farmland, between buying up enough ag products to make farmers captive and then dumping, and cheating in international trade, those three major ways, China has done a lot to make life for our farmers much more challenging and wiped out many American farms.
So why isn't something being done about that?
It's a good question. I think that depending upon who you talk to, there'd be debates about whether there are things being done and whether there aren't. One of the things that the Trump administration has done, as you're aware, I think, has gotten tougher on trade deals. And they've said that they want to, help prevent the American worker from getting ripped off and the American farmer from getting ripped off. There's a lot of debate around this. I want to be clear, but I just will say that farmers two things are true at once for farmers. One is they agree with getting tougher. They agree with utilizing tariffs where needed to drive tougher trade deals so that the Chinese have to agree to trade deals that are fair to them and so the Chinese can't cheat. It's also true that if trade disputes get too far out of control and the China just walks away, well, then the market is closed down and the prices plummet. So farmers need tougher trade deals, like President Trump has been talking about. They also need trade deals that are there, that are intact, so that the markets remain open. So it's a delicate balance for our farmers, and I think the Trump administration might argue they're working to deal with it on a trade front, and there's all kinds of debate about how effective that's been. But that's one element of how to deal with China. What we need is a bigger picture, long-term strategy, which is to say, while we're, go ahead.
Wait. What about just why aren't we or why haven't we just said they can't buy this farmland,
Yeah, I'm
especially
glad you
not
asked.
near military
Yeah,
places?
I'm glad you asked that. So Congress has debated off and on proposals for that exact thing and has never passed it. And I think it has to do with congressional gridlock. You do have individual states that have done that. Arkansas did that. In my home state of Wisconsin, the legislature passed it. It was vetoed, but I think there are people who want to try to bring it back around to see if they can figure out a bipartisan compromise. And what these bills generally say is if a country is on the list of foreign adversaries, they can't buy farmland. That's what the bill basically does. And it is being passed by more and more states because the feds, haven't passed it, just like they can't pass a whole heck of a lot of things. Another thing going on is other states, Missouri included, are taking legal action to come claw land back from foreign adversaries as well. So there's action being taken, but it's going to be more progress needed to address the issue fully.
So, to me, the idea of growing up on a farm just seems ideal, like you were so fortunate.
Yeah.
Um, so how did the story go when you wanted to go to college? When did you realize that you didn't want to take over the farm?
For me, I realized when I was 14, it was a very specific story. And each generation of a farm family has a time where they had to step up. And mine was at the age of 14. My sister and my dad, everybody, every farmer I know has a story like this. Mine was when I was at the age of 14. My dad was sick and he had some internal bleeding that it turned out led to an operation he needed to have that had to do with some cancerous cells. And so he was much more sick than we realized. And as a kid, I didn't know everything that was going on at the time. So he was laid up for a couple months, and we had a friend of the family who came to help with the milking in the morning and the evening. And I milked with that person, and I also did all the other work that my dad would have done. And so In some ways, it was kind of the experience of taking over the farm. And I had, since I was a kid, knew I didn't have my dad's talent for cattle and crops. The animals didn't listen to me the way they did him. They didn't warm to me. I had more broken tools and more machinery mishaps than he did. It was always a grind. I loved where I was from. I wanted to please my dad, but I was pushing a boulder uphill and I could feel myself failing. And when I was 14 and I did that with the help of a family friend, but did a lot of the work of a man for months on end, I was proud to do that. And I'm grateful for that opportunity looking back, but I also felt like I was failing each day.
Uh-huh.
And I knew when my dad came back, I think he had hope that maybe, now the boys farmed here for a couple months, maybe that fire
Mhm.
to want to take over is there. And while he was hoping for that, I was realizing that I did need to pursue something else, or I'd feel I was failing in life. And so that's
Mhm.
when I realized is at that pivotal moment.
And so you talked to your dad and you said,
Yeah. The funny thing is he knew before I did, I think, even though he had that
uh-huh.
hope when he came back that maybe things were different. He'll tell stories, and we tell this story in the book. Tell stories. I was supposed to be up in the haymow, and I worked hard for my dad. I did my best. I learned how to work. Every farm kid leaves the farm with superhuman work ethic. I'm grateful for it.
Mhm.
But I did my best to work hard for my dad. But there'd be things like I'd be up in the haymow when hay bales were coming in, and I was supposed to be guiding the hay bales into different parts of the haymow, and I had my nose in a book trying to do my job and also learn about the world. And he just knew that my gifts were elsewhere.
Uh-huh.
And my mom realized it before I did. And it took me a lot of painful failure to realize it myself. And when I said it, my dad understood it, was always supportive, wanted us to have choices. But I think it's honest to say that if he or I, either one of us had a magic wand, we'd wave the wand. He'd love to have all of his kids want to farm. He's
Mhm.
proud of my sister for wanting to farm. He'd be happy if I wanted to. And I'd wave that wand if I could have his talents too. And so instead, I tell our story.
Which is very important. Um, what is going to happen? I mean, how many boys does your sister have?
Yeah, my sister has three boys, no, four boys, excuse me, three older boys, and then a daughter, and then a little man that was born a year and a half ago. So she's got four sons and a daughter.
Uh-huh.
And her oldest son loves farming. He grew up with both of his grandpas farming, which is rare these days with how many farms have been disappearing.
Uh-huh.
And so I think we're going to figure out if he wants to farm full time or do other things. He also logs. He's got a lot of skills. He's grown up learning all kinds of trades, and he's a skilled, hardworking young man. And we're excited to see what he's going to do. And then she has other sons, and some of them may want to be part of the farm. Some may want to do other things, and we're going to see. But for now, what we're doing is she's working to take over the farm from my dad as my dad nears retirement. And we've got all kinds of young people around, and we're grateful. My little girl, she loves being out at the farm, and
Yeah.
she's only 2.5. So she just helped out me and Grandpa for the first time. She came out for morning chores the other week to join in the work. So
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
You have horses on the farm?
We don't. My sister is a big animal lover in general, and she had a horse for a while when we were young,
Uh-huh.
and so we have had them on the farm, but we don't now, and we haven't like actively farmed that. But she had a horse for a while. She even got my grandma to get on it, who was in her 80s at the time. So
Uh-huh. So, um, what would you like, what would you like to tell people about, I mean, why should people become farmers
yeah,
if they're not? You can kind of see we're talking about why they should stay farmers and what the
yeah,
problems are, but what about people who have never farmed? Because, I mean, I think there are, as the cities are getting tougher and tougher,
yeah,
more violent,
yeah,
I think people do have a dream of, oh man, if I only lived on a farm, I wouldn't be bothered by all of this. And
yeah.
so what do you do about that? Do you think there's hope?
It's a great question. I do think there's hope. I think that people who want to farm or live in a rural area, or if they live in an urban area, but they want to spend their money going back, working on, spending their money with local small businesses, whatever they can do to help lend a hand. Anybody who wants to do that, I think it's an admirable thing. And what I would say is this, there is hope. At the end of the day, we have been losing farms at a rate of 45,000 a year for the past century,
Oh,
45,000 a year
wow.
for 100 years.
So
But
what's
we
going to
still,
happen? Well, I know you say that if the farmer goes, the farmer
yeah.
disappears, food on the table disappears.
Yeah.
So what is happening to, I mean, how are we going to stop that?
Yeah. Well, we've got nearly 2 million farms left. 96% are family farms. So these are resilient people.
Right.
And we need to change government policy. We need to make it so that our technology will help farms of all sizes and shapes be accessible to all of them. They got to compete and be able to make it, but have that technology accessible. And also, more people never care about where their food comes from. And so the more people buy from a local farmer down the road, or from a farmer's market, or from an online marketplace where they can access farm fresh products, whatever the case may be, the more people do that, the more new types of crops and products farmers can grow, the more new entrepreneurial opportunity they can find. And that's really the key.
Hmm. Well, so what, well, let me, I didn't mention well, I did actually once, but let me mention again, your book, which has won awards. It was named the C-SPAN Author Series Pick Book of the Year and by the Nonpartisan Farm Foundation. Also, it won a Best Book Award. It was a Best Book Award winner for U.S. history and a Reader's Favorite Book Award recipient. So this book has is is making these issues better known, certainly. I mean, it really helps when you can tell a personal story because that's so much more interesting than just talking about, well, farmers are having a hard time.
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely.
Do you want to
Yeah.
say something about the angels?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I appreciate that. So you talk about personal story, the day after my dad sold the dairy herd, we're still farming, raising beef and dairy cattle for other farms, but he sold his milk herd, and that was a hard moment. And we were standing on the porch of my cabin talking, and I remember wondering, is he thinking about hurting himself? And I wanted to ask him, and I couldn't bear to bring it up. It was like a knife in my stomach. And I learned later interviewing him for the book that he actually was thinking about it at that time. So here we were standing right next to each other, and we were worlds apart. And the Farmer Angel Network filled a really important gap. They are an organization that they'll connect you with mental health professionals, but really what they are is peers. They're fellow farmers. So you don't have to be willing to want to come in and go talk to a psychologist or a therapist right away, although it's good for people to do that when they need that. But you got a friend stopping by and they're just there to visit. And here they are also connecting with you mentally and emotionally and seeing how you're doing and helping you connect the resources if you need it. So that's what Farmer Angel Network does. We had friends of the family stopping by to visit, and they were just being good friends and good neighbors, but they were also doing the work with Farmer Angel Network. And they talked with my dad, and over time, our family talked, and that's how he got through. And so, organizations like the Farmer Angel Network, they're at farmerangelnetwork.org. Those organizations are really doing the Lord's work out there.
And are they more than in Wisconsin? Are they all over?
So there are chapters being opened up all over. They started in Sauk County, Wisconsin, the county where our farm is, and they are opening up new chapters all across Wisconsin. They are nationally known, and there are different organizations like them that are doing that work. But they very well could end up being national if people are interested in organizing additional chapters. And I'm sorry, I misspoke. Their website is farmerangelnetwork.com, farmerangelnetwork.com for anybody who wants to check them out.
Okay, that's great. All right. And again, your book is Land Rich, Cash Poor. And I think I think that the work that you're doing is wonderful. And when we come back, because when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about this there's a new Maha report called that says a homesteading tsunami is bringing Americans back to the land. So apparently, there's a growing number of families who are leaving cities to get small plots of land in the countryside. It would be so nice if life went back to that. Norman, uh, the old days of when fathers took their sons fishing and the old what am I trying to think of Norman Rockwell, there we go,
Yeah,
Norman Rockwell
yeah,
paintings.
absolutely. Well, it's such an important thing, and I know you're about to head to break. I'll just say briefly, people who want to reconnect with the land, It's such a valuable thing to do, whether you move back there full time, whether you split your time, whether you, again, spend your money with local farmers and in rural communities and small towns, however you can. We have more ability to do that these days than ever. COVID was a terrible thing, but one of the things it showed is that a lot of things can be mobile and be done from anywhere. And so whether you're moving your entire life back, which is I applaud if you're able to do that, or whether you're finding a way to engage in the rural economy, there's nothing but good that can come from people, money, and ideas flowing into rural America. And by the way, it can help everyone because our food prices, they spike because our supply chain is so vulnerable because we've been wiping out farms for decades. There's so many problems, whether it's
Uh-huh.
our food prices, environmental, national security. We can solve so many problems by investing in our rural communities.
Absolutely. And take back the land from China.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian Reisinger, for being a guest on the show. And I wish you and your father and your family, I hope they go on for another couple of centuries.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your work.
And now we're going to take a break, and we will be right back. And welcome back to Dr. Carol's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carol Lieberman. We were just talking about the the current state of farmers and how difficult it is, and how, in some ways it's like a dream, everybody's dream to grow up. It was the American dream to grow up on a farm and um, have family, close families living nearby and have family, country dances and, well, riding horses, that's my thing. And, there's so much romance about that. And yet today's story, I mean, there's obviously still some of that, but today's farmers are very much threatened by our last guest was talking about because of a lot of economical problems and so on. Well, one thing to have it not be all doom and gloom, there is, according to Maha, the Maha report, there is a homesteading tsunami, and that is bringing Americans back to the land. So there's a growing number of American families who are leaving cities and trying to go back to this older American dream. There's a man called Joel Salatin who runs Polyface Farm in the hills of Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, and he calls this the homestead tsunami. So there are events nationwide that have begun devoted to homesteading and farming. One of them or some of them are put on by Homesteaders of America Conference in Virginia, and then another one is Modern Homesteading Conference in Idaho. So Joel Salatin wrote a book that came out in 2024 called Homestead Tsunami, Good for Country, Critters, and Kids, which is talking about how Americans are moving back and becoming more self-sufficient. Some of this, I mean, this is somewhat akin to the preppers. It's not necessarily exactly the same because preppers are more interested in underground silos or things like that. But some of them also are developing their own farms because that's how they can be self-sufficient. So that is sort of the key. And then, of course, COVID, when we couldn't, when we were restricted from moving out of our homes and so on, a lot of people realized that if they had a farm or at least a house where they, and a small property where they could grow their own food, they wouldn't have to worry about wearing masks in grocery stores in town. Um, he says there's been a real disconnect between the younger generation and where their food comes from. Um, People have an intuition that there is more opportunity in the country than in the city to be self-sufficient. The problem is we are now several generations removed from commonly knowing how to gut a chicken, tap a maple tree, and plant tomatoes. I mean, yes, that is the main problem. Um, like my guest, Brian Reisinger, was just describing about his, what life was like growing up on a farm. We don't have fathers who are teaching how to gut chickens or tap maple trees, plant tomatoes. Actually, my grandfather used to plant. We didn't have a farm. We had a country home, 50 miles north of New York City. They did, my grandparents. And he used to plant tomatoes and he planted all kinds of things, beans and I learned how to do that from him. But I'm not saying I'm not saying I would be able to run a farm, but it is, that's how you learn things. In fact, we used to have a tradition where when the men would come home from work in the city at night, uh, my cousin and I would sell tomatoes to my grandfather and my father and my uncle. Of course, it was my grandfather's tomatoes, but that used to be the fun thing to do. We would pick them and we would put out salt on the table and napkins and maybe something to drink. And they would have their tomatoes when they got out of their cars and came home. So it's a little bit it's similar. A mini farm. So then during COVID, when seed companies sold out and canning supplies disappeared from shelves, and the backyard chicken flocks, you remember, I don't, a lot of people started having chickens in their backyard so they could have eggs. Um, and then also there were more searches for sourdough recipes, canning methods, and so on because it was a reaction to an empty supermarket, and this is what started people thinking there must be a better way. So the thing that's missing though is the father or grandfather teaching their children how to follow them in this in farming or in knowing how to do these things that you don't learn in school. Of course, some places have 4-H clubs and so on, and you can learn it there, depending upon where you live, whether it's a farmland kind of area. Of course, the reason why MAHA is getting involved in this is because they care a lot about healthy foods, which we should all care about because it is so, so true that the foods we eat today are so in general, the foods that are in our grocery stores, our supermarkets, they are so diminished in vitamins and minerals and things that we need, and yet they are so filled with chemicals that are making us all sick, making Americans sick. You may not realize it, you may not. I mean, it's not necessarily something where it's clear how this is affecting us specifically, but it is in general. People are sick. We know people are sicker, whether it's cancer or other kinds of things, and a lot of it comes from the food that we're not getting. I remember going to a spa years ago and asking, well, why do we need all these vitamins? Wondering if they were just trying to sell us vitamins. And why do we need all this? Why, if we eat a healthy diet, why is that not enough? And the answer was because first of all, it's not a healthy diet and it's deprived, the food is deprived of these kinds of healthy things. So if everybody ate healthier, from farmland from farm to table, that saying, and missing the production, the processing plants in between, we would all be a lot healthier. So I like what Brian said about, and it's so true. Every city has um, places where they have farmers markets. It may be a little further from you or closer, depending upon where you live in your city. But there are farmers markets, and it would be good to shop there. At least for some of the things, to shop for fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, and things like that. Now, of course, there's Amish country, and they're certainly still having healthy foods, still farming. Now, there's something called Farm Match. It's an online marketplace that is described as, quote, Etsy for local food. In other words, individual people who are, and this it connects consumers with vetted farms and buying clubs, so you can feel safe in what you're buying. And the food the food people eat it is, quote, the single biggest determinant of their ability to perform their life. The healthier food you eat, the more you're able to perform whatever it is that you want to do in life. Um, let's see. So yes, of course, these new homesteaders are facing steep learning curves, health problems with animals, crop failures, predators, infrastructure costs, and physical demands. And plus, it keeps getting more and more expensive to buy land. Um, but there are these agencies that are helping you now to do this. And you should keep a lookout for what MAHA is doing in this regard. So let's see. So now I'm going to, the show is from farmers to families. And what's ailing America from farmers to families. Um, and there is no question, but there is something. There are more things ailing Americans today than in the past, at least in terms of some of the um, things that we read in the newspapers every day, where that are very, very unhealthy. For example, I'm just picking up, I'm taking today's news. Let's see what we have here. Minneapolis, where am I? Minneapolis couple accused of racially abusing Somali's house. Shopping in their neighborhood make shocking new claims against their accusers. So this is about, it's called White Picket Fury. This is about this couple who were seen arguing with two Somali sisters in Minnesota, of course, where else? And they were not happy that these Somalians were planning on buying a house in their neighborhood. But then there's this question of, so the Somalians took a video of this, and of course that went viral. And of course, the point that, some people are trying to make is that this is racist and so on. But there's the other side, which is, as you may well know, in Minnesota, that a lot of Somali families have been involved in very fraudulent kinds of enterprises. Um, with whether it's medical, making false charges for medicine, for alleged treatment of patients, whether it's daycare. I mean, it was the main thing. The first thing that really made the news was the daycare fraud, where it was exposed that these buildings, these buildings that have daycare signs on them, of course, with misspellings too, that it turns out that there are no kids in there. This is all a fraud. And so, it's sort of, there's sort of one can understand why some people might be angry that their state's money, and of course, this is happening all over America, not just with Somalis, but, fraud being discovered all over. But anyhow, so that's one of the things. That's one of the things we have to worry about. And then let's see. Then we have, of course, there's the World Cup going on. That it's so interesting though. One of the things that's interesting about the cup, besides the sport itself, is that foreigners who are coming to America and who are seeing how friendly Americans are and who are enjoying things like refills in certain restaurants, that you can, once you drink the first drink, you can go back and get a refill. And, I lived in Europe. I lived in Belgium and France and England. And, and you do not get, not only don't you get refills, but the portions in these countries are incredibly, incredibly small. And then, of course, they come to America, with heaping plates. Not that that's necessarily healthy, but it's different. And then, of course, we have the whole Charlie Kirk issue, which, because there is the beginning of the trial of Tyler Robinson. And, the whole Charlie Kirk assassination was so terrible. Some of you may know I had Charlie Kirk on my show a while back, not that long before he was assassinated. He was a great guy. He was authentic, and he was so important in terms of teaching kids in colleges, um, you know, family values and religious values. And he wasn't trying to push his religion, but just the sense of religion in general. And that was really something that was helping to give purpose and a sense of um, of of somebody watching over you. He was really his what he did a lot of good things for people who were in college, and he was bringing it down to the high school level, and he had a lot of work ahead of him that he was on he was just starting really, and he was planning on bringing this to people of all ages and just showing a healthier side of America. So we need to take another break, but when we come back, I will have some other examples of stories of why our mental health is going down the drain. Well, just with Charlie Kirk, I just want to mention, the real, I mean, we lost him, and that was a huge, huge loss. But the really crazy part came after that, where some people, including teachers, were promoting the idea that it's great that Charlie Kirk died. And, it's not great that anybody dies, but somebody is as good, as authentic as Charlie Kirk, and who had so much to give, it's really a tragedy. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. But in terms of the World Cup, it's nice to know that people from other countries are appreciating. It's still not as bad in our country as it is in others. Then Charlie Kirk, the fact that somebody could be assassinated, and he wasn't doing anything bad, and he was assassinated, and then there were people who were basically dancing on his grave and saying, "Oh, what a horrible person he was, and it's good that he was assassinated." Anyhow, some of them lost their jobs, but some of them got their jobs back and, sued and got their back. They shouldn't have gotten their jobs back, especially not teachers, if they were telling their, going online and saying that it was great that he died. Then something else to be afraid of. Um, Warning to millions as lung damaging air sweeps across 5 U.S. states today. Apparently, there are there's there's lung damaging air. There's Legionnaire's disease that is has reared its ugly head again, and people in those areas are coming down with it. Now, here, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Taylor Swift. Oh my goodness, I could talk forever about Taylor Swift, and not in a good way. I'm not a Swiftie. Um, her wedding at the Madison Square Garden was just, if you wanted to look for garish, if you wanted to have the most garish wedding, this would be it. And in fact, people are saying that people who were at the wedding, who are coming out and talking about how things like, the champagne was gone. There was very little champagne and it was gone very quickly. I mean, like she couldn't afford to have more champagne at her wedding. Um, and all kinds of other things. Um, but for me as a psychiatrist, what I see it. First of all, well, it really angers me that she did this on July 4th weekend. The Thursday, Friday, and the weekend. Taking some people away from doing things for July 4th. In fact, somebody, I can't remember what it was, some event that usually happens. He changed the date because of Taylor Swift's wedding so that more people would be able to come to his event. Instead of staring at a television set or online looking at trying to get the latest information about her wedding. Anyhow, the thing is, besides all of that, this is a big red flag because if you love somebody, you don't need Madison Square Garden to hold your wedding in it. You need a garden. A garden is always nice, but not a huge building that you then uh, have all kinds of props that you turn it into a garden. That doesn't make any sense. It's just showing off. And what it shows off is that there's really not enough love, not enough real love, true love between the two of them. They are so caught up in PR and in just making, phony things, making things seem like more than they are. And I mean, I'm not talking about her singing. But also the wedding was also served in, so I think they're going to get divorced is my prediction. I don't know when, but this marriage is not going to last because if they needed all of that around them to make them feel excited and happy and beautiful and all that, to make the wedding worthwhile, then there really isn't enough between the two of them. But what was also interesting is that this was kind of a revenge. You've heard of revenge dresses. Well, this was a revenge wedding. She makes all these songs about guys who dumped her, basically, or relationships that didn't work out. And and this was a revenge wedding on these guys where the relationships didn't work out and who she really got hurt by, as she sang about in her songs. She was hurting them in at least some of them in her songs, and now this was sort of the total revenge. See, I was never supposed to. I never wanted to marry you anyway. Look at this. Look at who I'm marrying, and look at what a great wedding I'm having. Okay. Oh, then we have, of course, the Carmelo Anthony case. Carmelo Anthony, who killed Austin Metcalf. So, outrageous new entitled request by murderer Carmelo Anthony revealed as he launches fresh bid to be freed from prison for killing of Austin Metcalf. He's asking for a new trial and a different judge. I mean, hello. There's no question that he killed Austin Metcalf. But the thing that isn't getting promoted or spoken about enough is that after he put the knife into Austin, after Carmelo struck Austin with a knife, and you know the rest of the story because why that happened. But he ran away. Like he tried to say at his trial that it was self-defense. If it's self-defense, you don't have to run away. But he ran away. And then somebody, a policeman or somebody ran after him, and they said to him, or they called to other people, he's the alleged murderer of Austin, or something like that. And what Carmelo said is, not alleged, I killed him, or it was me, something like that. He took well, I don't want to say he took responsibility, he was proud of it. I killed him and I'm proud of it, or I knifed him and I'm proud of it. He didn't know that he was dead yet, but I knifed him. I struck him with the knife, whatever the exact words were. But the point is, he was proud of it. So clearly, it was a racial thing, and he wanted people to know that he did it. That was until he got tried. That not in his trial, in his trial he was innocent, he claimed. Um, Okay. Anyway, my point here is I'm just going down the page, uh, talking about all the things that there are. This is one page, the first page of the Daily Mail, and of course, there's all kinds of stuff about Harry and Meghan, and Harry's visit to London and all of that. Now, also, there's a skyscraper in New York City, a huge skyscraper, um, is now falling down. And they evacuated not only that skyscraper, which was actually under construction, and obviously it must have something to do with the construction that it all of a sudden fell down or is falling down. But they're making people evacuate who live or work near there. They're taking blocks, a big square, chunk of Midtown Manhattan, making people leave because they're afraid that the whole building is going to fall down and then it'll affect the buildings next to them. So let's see. Sagging New York skyscraper is accused of carrying out unauthorized construction after beams collapsed and floors buckled, sparking fears of partial collapse onto Midtown Manhattan. Then, of course, there were all these things about the fires and the fireworks and the New York mayor, who is a terrorist sympathist, who, who is he's sympathetic to terrorists. He is a terrorist, in my opinion, and he's also a communist. Um, what else do we have? So all these things, just a random look at the front page of this paper shows all the things that go in that we look at. I read this first. I read a number of papers in the morning, first thing, and you see all these crazy things. Particularly, I'm seeing a lot of families. All these fathers killing their wife and their children, or mothers killing their husbands and their children, and just all kinds of people dying, young people dying, which, there are various reasons, but something that isn't getting reported really, for all of them or most of them, or when it's the case, is how they took the COVID vaccine. There are lots of people dying at all different ages, people who took the COVID vaccine. But, we don't get to hear that, depending upon what you're reading, of course, but you don't often get to hear that. So, because we're not supposed to say anything bad about COVID, or about the vaccine. If I haven't taken the vaccine, I didn't let my daughter take the vaccine, and I don't think anybody should take the vaccine. So with that, I will end today's show. It's kind of a mishmash. I'm sorry about that. A mishmash of interesting things, though, I hope you found. Um, and I also hope that it made you think about farmers more seriously than we do. We just kind of assume that they're going to be there and keep feeding us. And really, more has to be done to make it easier for the farmers. And particularly, as you heard in the first part, I really think something should be done to stop the Chinese from being able to buy the land in the first place, especially near military bases. Well, this has been Dr. Carol's Couch, and thank you for listening and watching, and I will see you next week.